You know what? Never let anyone cost your peace of mind or your sleep. Unreliable people don't deserve your trust, not even the ones you call friends. I had trusted a friend with some money because he was in trouble again. He told me not to worry and that I get it back in a week. The thing is, I needed that cash to cover my rent, but he never paid me back, and he kept coming up with excuses. So when the day the rent was due finally came, I didn't have enough money. So the landlord gave me a hard time. And yeah, I felt angry, frustrated, and honestly a bit stupid for counting on him. For a couple of nights, I couldn't even sleep right, just thinking about how badly I'd messed up. But at some point, I told myself, all right, deal with it and move on. So I worked extra hours, picked up a side job, and little by little, I got back on my feet. In the end, I figured out I didn't just recover the money, I also learned the hard way not to rely on people who let you down once and again and don't show up when it really matters. So that's not gonna happen again. Maybe you've been through something like this. Not the exact same story, but the same feeling. And the thing is, it's never really just about the money. It's about counting on someone and realize you're on your own when you need them the most. And that hits hard because you don't just feel broke, you feel vulnerable. Like, wow, how did I put myself in this situation? And here's what I think. When something like this happens, it feels like it's all about the money, but it's not. Money is just the surface. What really hurts is the moment you realize you trusted the wrong person. Because now you're dealing with two problems at the same time. You're dealing with the practical problem, rent, bills, the pressure, the deadline, but you're also dealing with the emotional one. That quiet drop in your stomach, that voice in your head going, how did I not see this coming? And it's not even just disappointment, it's embarrassment. Because you didn't just lose money, you feel like you lost judgment, like you betrayed yourself a little bit, and that's why it messes with your sleep. Not because you're doing math at night, but because your brain keeps replaying the same questions. Should I have said no? Should I have asked more questions? Was I being naive? And the worst part is, you're not just stressed, you're stressed and disappointed at the same time. And that combination is heavy because the person who created the problem isn't the one carrying the weight. You are. And at some point, you have to be honest about something. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't timing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was about character. Because when someone really cares, they don't disappear when things get uncomfortable. They don't avoid your messages. They don't keep pushing the problem forward. They don't leave you alone to deal with consequences they helped create. And that's the part people don't like to admit. Some people don't mean harm, but they also don't feel responsibility. And when life gets hard, when deadlines show up, when rent is due, when pressure is real, good intentions mean nothing. What matters is who shows up. And that's where it hurts, because this wasn't just anyone. This was a friend, someone you trusted, someone you gave the benefit of the doubt, someone you didn't want to believe could put you in this position. But you know what? Real life doesn't care about labels. Friend, family, history, none of that pays your bills. None of that fixes the problem. And when you're the one lying awake at night, trying to figure things out, you realize something uncomfortable. You're carrying the weight alone. And the person who caused it, guess what? Is sleeping just fine. That's when you understand. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about limits. Because if someone can watch you struggle and still not step up, they do not deserve access to your trust. Not in real life. And here's the uncomfortable part. At the end of the day, the person most affected by this situation is also the person who allowed it to happen. And that's not blame. That's responsibility. There's a big difference. Because no one forced you to trust. No one forced you to say yes. No one forced you to take that risk. You chose to. And that's hard to admit, especially when you're trying to help, trying to be loyal, trying to be a good friend. But real life doesn't work on intentions. It works on outcomes. Jim Rohn once said something very simple, but very honest. Either you run your life or your life runs you. And moments like this make that clear. When you don't set limits, life sets them for you. Usually in the most painful way, through stress, through loss, through consequences. And that's when you realize being kind doesn't mean being careless. Being understanding doesn't mean being blind. Because adulthood is this strange balance. You're responsible for your choices, even when someone else lets you down, even when their behavior was wrong. And that's the part that changes you. Not the money, not the argument, but the moment you understand that protecting your peace, your stability, your sleep is your job, no one else's. And maybe that's what moments like this are really about. Not money, not conflict, not even betrayal. They're about growth. Jim Rohn once said something that stayed with me. He said, "Take full responsibility for whatever happens to you." And then he added something even more important. He said, "That's the day you know you've moved from being a child to being an adult." Because adulthood isn't about age, it's about ownership. It's the moment you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What am I going to do differently next time?" Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You don't become colder, you become wiser. You don't stop trusting, you become more selective. And you don't close your heart, you protect your life. Because real maturity is quiet. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just makes better choices. And once you accept full responsibility, you stop repeating the same lessons. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. And that's when things truly change. I had trusted a friend with some money because he was in trouble again. He told me not to worry and that I get it back in a week. The thing is, I needed that cash to cover my rent, but he never paid me back, and he kept coming up with excuses. So when the day the rent was due finally came, I didn't have enough money. So the landlord gave me a hard time. And yeah, I felt angry, frustrated, and honestly a bit stupid for counting on him. For a couple of nights, I couldn't even sleep right, just thinking about how badly I'd messed up. But at some point, I told myself, all right, deal with it and move on. So I worked extra hours, picked up a side job, and little by little, I got back on my feet. In the end, I figured out I didn't just recover the money, I also learned the hard way not to rely on people who let you down once and again and don't show up when it really matters. So that's not gonna happen again.